Hello, guys, and welcome to the War of 1812 in a single lesson. We're going to be racing through, and we're not going to hit every single detail, but let's get right into it. Jefferson had been president for 8 years, and he's allowed to run for a third term, but no one has yet. So he decides that he doesn't want the president to be too powerful. So just like Washington, he says, I'm just not going to run again. But I am going to get my best buddy to run instead. And his Secretary of State was right along with him in politics from the very beginning, believed all the same things. So I said, I'm not going to be president, but I'll get him nominated. That is James Madison. James Madison, obviously very important and famous founding father, has been involved in the American government from the very beginning, helped write the Constitution, did very, very well. And as you can see from this map, here's how many votes Madison got. Here's how many votes Mr. Pinckney got with the Federalist Party. Remember, the Federalists aren't doing so well because they passed those laws saying if you criticize the president, you get chucked in jail. So the Federalists are well, their reputation is taking a hit. Here's all the states that voted for Madison. All right. So if you recall, both England and France, they've been fighting each other, but America's trying to be neutral with both of them. So both England and France don't like that we like the other guy. So we're kind of stuck in the middle, and both of them have been attacking our ships and stuff, and it's been a big mess. And so to try to fix the mess, Mr. Macon introduced a bill to Congress called Macon's Bill number 2, because they were really good at naming things back then. And that said, we will trade with both sides because we are neutral. However, if one side stops attacking us, stops stealing our ships, stops being such a jerk to us, we will only trade with them. So, okay, France and England, it's up to you to decide whose side we're going to be on. If France is nice to us, we'll be nice to France only. If England's nice to us, we'll be nice to England only. So it's up to you guys. Napoleon initially repealed a lot of laws that were unfavorable to America. So Napoleon's writing good laws to try to play nice with America, but then he also sends ships to attack our ships and steal all our stuff. So I don't know what's going through his head. He's probably just distracted by his massive wars and not really thinking very straight. But even though Napoleon is first trying to be nice, then trying to be mean, then trying to be nice again, we decide we like France better than England for whatever reason, and we cut off all trade with England. They really don't like that because they're like, hey, America, I thought you were neutral. If you're neutral, why won't you trade with us? It seems like you're trying to join the war on the French side. There were a group of Americans who did want to join the war on the French side. There were a group of Americans who wanted to join the war on the English side. But here are two of the leaders of what we call the war hawks, the people who really wanted war. They are Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, and what lovely photographs we have of these guys. I love Mr. Calhoun's little neck beard there and his hair. That's lovely. Not that I can say much. It's been a rough week for me. With all the British restrictions on our trade, they're saying it's going to hurt our westward push. All that westward farms, they all need to trade their grain out of the country, and British restrictions are hurting us, so they don't like that. They're also afraid that the British are causing Indian attacks, and they really were. The British around the Great Lakes region were encouraging the Indians to attack us and stirring up fear that we're going to steal all their land, which we were, but that's not the point. A lot of war hawks wanted to seize Canada and make Canada a state, part of the United States. Why should England have a lot of land just north of us? Why not make Canada part of America? Which, of course, never happened, but we tried. The House of Representatives is strongly war hawkish, strongly pro-war, and they pressure Madison for several years to declare war on England, which eventually we do. Madison gave 5 reasons to Congress for declaring war, and this is really what the Constitution says. To declare war, the president has to give reasons to Congress, and then Congress has to vote on it. So Madison says, here's the top 5 reasons to declare war. Number 1, England's been impressing our soldiers. Remember what that means? They would stop American ships and then force American sailors to work in the British Navy. It's forced recruitment. It's kind of like a draft. Sometimes the military has a draft where the government forces you to join the military, but it's like a draft of a different country. England is forcing American sailors to work for their navy, which of course is a huge no-no. You're not allowed to kidnap our people. Number two, violations of our coastal water. They kept on sending battleships into our land, our land, obviously, our water, our area, and you can't send your warships into our cities. That's our place. Stay out. Number three, plundering our goods. They kept on stopping American ships and stealing all the stuff. Number four, bad trade restrictions. We're not allowed to trade with them because they think we like France too much, which I don't know, we kind of do. And number five, inciting the Indians to attack us. And Congress declared that if England did not stop all these things and apologize to us, we would declare war. So England stopped and apologized. They repealed a lot of their laws that said they would do that, and they issued a formal apology. But then we declared war because we did not know. Their letter was in a slow ship, and it's crossing the Atlantic while we decided to declare war. So that makes the War of 1812 kind of absolutely useless. Both sides are getting mad at each other. We're yelling at each other across the pond. And eventually they say, you know what? We don't want a war with you. We'll play nice now. Too late. Oh, come on. If we had the internet, if we had phones, if we had a telegram, that wouldn't have happened. But of course, we didn't have any of those things. We just had letters on sailing ships. Too late. We entered the war divided as a nation. Many people did not want the war with England. Many people wanted to join England with war against France. So America is very divided about this war, and we are not ready for war whatsoever. We are a brand new nation. This is only the second war we've ever fought, the Revolution, and then this. Really, you could say this is the first war that America has fought as a country. In New England, it's so unpopular that they call it Mr. Madison's War. We call it the War of 1812 because, we're not great at naming things either. Congress is split, just like the nation is, as to how much they like the war. And Congress voted not to increase the Navy because it would cost too much. Like, seriously, we're going into an all-out war with the strongest naval power on Earth, and you don't want to buy any more ships because it's too expensive? I mean, it's war. What? They decided not to increase the number of ships. We have 16 warships against the biggest navy on Earth. That's not good. We have just 7,000 men in our army. A standing army means the army that's around in peacetime. Back then, they thought the army's too expensive, so when there's a war, call up an army, and when there's peace, send all the army home. So we only had this emergency force of 7,000 soldiers, and that's not very many soldiers at all. The only real advantage we have over England is Napoleon. Napoleon in France has been rampaging throughout Europe, and England is the only strong nation powerful enough to resist Napoleon. And so England has its hands tied. If it was straight up England versus America, they would have stomped us at this time. And if Napoleon wasn't around, we would very well have lost the War of 1812, but Napoleon was around. So a lot of English troops and ships are caught up fighting Napoleon and can't be bothered with little old us, thankfully for us. Mr. Clay, Congressman Clay, boasts that the Americans could take all of Canada with just the Kentucky militia. He's from Kentucky, so he has a high view of his militia. So we send an army up north to go invade Canada and steal it for America. Two problems. Number one, Canada is very, very large. So you can't just, take one city and call it a day. You have to, it's a big place. And number two, Canada likes England. Canada doesn't want to join America. In the war, most Canadians are joining the English forces against America. They don't want to be part of America. General Hull, right here, plans to invade the Great Lakes region up through Detroit, and General Van Rensselaer is going to attack north from New York City. But British General Brock surrounded Mr. Hull at Fort Detroit and then surrounded Van Rensselaer at Niagara, and we lost big time both battles. Detroit was the biggest fort we had in the West with the most soldiers there, and the British were able to surround it, and we gave up without a fight. General Hull surrendered without a fight, and a lot of people blamed him for being drunk all the time and being a coward. He didn't want to fight, so he just gave up, when he may very well have won that battle, if he had fought. So he gets in major trouble, gets court-martialed for being a drunkard and a coward and all that. There's several other smaller battles around here. There's up through Niagara Falls and all that. That's where General Van Rensselaer was fighting. Notice some Vermonters do go up north and attack Montreal as well. Also failed. After Hull was completely humiliated and the American army lost our biggest army, William Henry Harrison was appointed general out there. He had been fighting Indians for a while. He had been doing a very good job, and he's going to continue to do a very good job in the War of 1812, and that makes him a national hero, and eventually he runs for president and becomes president. Maybe you've heard the name William Henry Harrison. Lake Erie was very important for controlling the region, because if you have a town anywhere in Lake Erie, you can move your soldiers anywhere else in Lake Erie if you have control of the water, if you have a navy there. So the British did have a navy there, and they could pop up their soldiers anywhere they wanted. And so we really need to take Lake Erie back. Mr. Harrison, General Harrison, starts building a navy, and Oliver Hazard Perry is the naval guy in charge of building that. They start building a fleet from scratch. They just chop down a bunch of trees and start building battleships. And they keep on going, building a rather sizable fleet. And eventually they fight, and there is this massive fight on Lake Erie. And Oliver Hazard Perry sends back the very famous message, "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." Oh, what an understated thing for victory there. We met the enemy, we won, the end. If I remember correctly, you should look up this. I believe there are YouTube videos about the Battle of Lake Erie. If I remember correctly, Oliver Hazard Perry's flagship, he was on the biggest ship, and that's where he was directing the efforts, and it sank, and he hopped out into a rowboat and rowed over to the next ship over and kept on directing the battle and won the battle. Pretty cool. Oliver Hazard Perry comes from a famous naval family. His younger, I don't remember if it was a younger brother or a younger cousin, Matthew Perry, famous for the opening of Japan in a few decades. Tecumseh he was an Indian chief. He had gotten like all the Indians of the Great Lakes region to have this huge confederation, this huge army, and they had been doing very well against America for many years. But eventually, William Henry Harrison's army fights Tecumseh and his army at the Battle of Thames in Canada, and wins. The Indians lose. Tecumseh died, and no longer are the Indians going to put up a major force in the Great Lakes area. We already saw some fighting at sea when you watch the stuff about the USS Constitution. I love the Constitution. At sea, we do very, very well in single engagements, because remember, we have these 6 frigates that are the top-of-the-line technology. But even better than the technology is the training. It doesn't matter how many cannons you have if the people are so bad at aiming that they can't hit a thing. And if I recall, I watched a few videos on the Constitution that I didn't send you, and I don't remember if this was in one that I sent you or not. But there was one time, one of these battles, that said the Constitution shot this other ship, I believe it was the Guerriere, and there were like 300 holes in this other ship, and they only got hit like 3 or 4 times. So if your side hits the other side 100 times more than they hit you, obviously you're going to win. And that's completely due to training and practicing that we're much more accurate than they are. The USS Constitution did an incredible job. General Hull, the awful general who surrendered out of cowardice and drinking too much, his nephew was the captain of the Constitution, so he has something to prove that he needs to regain his family honor, and so he is doing a terrific job at that. I love this picture, fighting the Guerriere, where there's some holes in the mast or in the sails up here of the Constitution. It's a little battered, but the Guerriere is just completely destroyed. Love it. And it's the battle against the Java that all of these cannonballs are bouncing off the Constitution, because it has such strong sides. And someone says, "Huzzah! Her sides are made of iron." Love it. Another one of our our ships, the Wasp, defeated their Frolic, and the United States defeated the Macedonian. That was a very famous battle. You should watch a YouTube about that. That's a great little battle there. Besides our Navy, we have a very small, what did I say, like 16 official ships in our Navy. We do hire 500 privateers, though. So we don't have nothing at sea. We have something. And our 500 privateers over the course of the war captured about 1,300 British vessels. And these are primarily trading ships, merchant ships that we are capturing, but some military ships there as well. So we do all right at sea. In fact, our frigates are doing so well at sea that the English send out a general orders that all British ships must travel in groups of 3 or more, because they do not think that they could beat us in single combat. So 3 or more. And of course, they have plenty of ships to do that. Speaking of the British having plenty of ships to go after us 3-1 or 4-1 or 5-1, they actually outnumber us at sea about 50-1. They have 50 times the ships America has. So we have 16 ships. And what's 16 times 50? Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot of ships. Of course, those are not all like battleships and huge ships. Some of those are small sloops, corvettes. By the way, a corvette is a very small, very fast ship that's not really meant to attack other battleships. It's meant to go after trading ships. So you might have a small ship with only like 6 cannons on it, 4 cannons maybe. Very small, very fast though. And that's why, of course, the car company named themselves Corvettes, after very small, fast. We're talking about a tiny ship that has the same amount of sails as a ship 3 times its size. Very fast. Only a couple cannons, but enough to make an unarmed ship stop. Anyway, 50-1. And so their major idea, I'd say their major strategy is to blockade us. Anyone played Parcheesi before? You have to move your pieces around and go all the way around the board and then home. But if 2 enemies are on the same spot, your guys can't pass it. So the idea of a blockade is you surround an enemy harbor with your ships, and then any of their ships trying to get in and out are going to be stopped. So basically shuts down all their port cities. Very effective. They say it's not our strategy to fight the Americans one-on-one, because of course the Americans are beating them one-on-one. Very effective. Almost all of our ships are either captured or they're stuck in port. They're too scared to leave. Then they defeat our battleship, or frigate, I should say, the Chesapeake. And the last words of the Chesapeake were, "Don't give up the ship." That was the last words of the captain who got shot there. This is actually a really sad story. I watched a YouTube about this as well. With the Chesapeake, the captain, I forget the captain's name. The captain did an amazing job in his previous role, and he was just smashing the British one after another. But then he's given command of a new ship and a brand new crew. And he leaves town on his ship with a bunch of sailors who had never done this job before, and he absolutely gets decimated in his first battle. He gets just smashed, and he gets killed himself. As he's dying, he says, "Don't give up the ship." And this naval historian that I'm watching says, he did so well in the earlier battles because his men were so experienced. He had people who really knew what they were doing. And he's given an equally good ship, but it's not about the ship. It's not about the cannons. It's about how you use them. And his new crew doesn't know how to use them. And so we lose. So the British come up with a 3-part strategy of winning the war. They've been doing pretty well, except for a few engagements at sea. They've been doing very well. First of all, an army would invade New York from Canada. So come down from Canada to New York City. They would split the nation in half. Next, the Navy and Marines would go all up and down the East Coast, just popping up, surprise, attack a city, burn it down, hop back on your ship, go somewhere else. So the American army would not be able to defend there. And number 3, a massive army would attack New Orleans and go up the Mississippi River and attack our western farms. Really good strategy here. I love it. Good thing their plan failed, or we'd all be speaking English right now. Their plan did fail, unfortunately for them, and fortunately for us. Well, somewhat failed. You'll see. A very small American fleet defeated a much larger British fleet on Lake Champlain. So when they're coming down from Canada to New York City, they're going through Lake Champlain. Remember Fort Ticonderoga and all of that. This fleet was actually based at Fort Ticonderoga and goes up to about where Plattsburgh, New York is. And by the way, Plattsburgh, New York is right across the lake from where I used to live, outside of Burlington, Vermont. So this is a really cool battle. It's such a cool battle, so uneven odds that the British Naval Academy still studies the Battle of Plattsburgh to this day. And in Vermont, there is a really cool ship that they dug up from the Battle of Plattsburgh. There were several American and British ships that were sunk to the bottom there. They found one, raised it up, and got it all nice, restored and everything. Kept in Vermont for years. Actually, now it's in the Smithsonian. Maybe the seniors can go see that this year. They found another one though, and they decided to leave it at the bottom of the ocean so they could study it more without raising it up. They were afraid that if they raised it up, the oxygen would deteriorate it and rot the wood too fast. They're leaving it right where it is. And it's a complete secret. They're not telling anyone where it is because they're afraid divers might go down there and mess it up. So that's fun. But I was able to see that old ship that they raised up from the Battle of Plattsburgh. Very fun. So they were not able to come down. The second stage going all up and down the East Coast was very, very successful. They actually went right for DC once, and they fought the Battle of Bladensburg, and they defeated our army. And now there is no American army defeating DC, and so they literally just march right up to DC. Madison and other politicians flee the city, and just in time, like the afternoon, hours before the British army shows up, our president and congressmen are right there. So imagine if they got captured. That would have been very bad for us. They run away. Dolly Madison stays behind for just a few minutes, just ransacking the White House, trying to get all the important stuff out. So she gets this horse-drawn carriage, and they're just getting boxes of silverware and important papers and all sorts of things. There's this really famous oil painting of Washington. It's huge. It's one of the only oil paintings that Washington actually sat for. And she's trying to get servants to take it off the wall, and it's nailed into the wall, and they just can't do it. So she says, whatever. She takes a knife and she cuts around the edges and rolls up this painting and runs. And they flee, and as they're fleeing out of the city, they could see this line of redcoats coming into the city, and they're like, whew, barely made it. The British marched into D.C., and they march to the White House, and they go into the dining room of the White House, and there is President Madison's meal on the dining room table, and it's still warm. So British soldiers sit down and eat the president's lunch. Whoa, that was a close call. Then they sack the White House, find anything of value, find trinkets, souvenirs, steal whatever they want. They go to the Library of Congress, and they pile all the books in the center and light them on fire. They burn the White House down. They burn the Library of Congress down. They burn down several buildings. Now, a lot of these buildings do have stone outsides, but all the inside is wooden. So everything gets completely gutted and destroyed. By the way, after they burnt the Library of Congress a few years later after the war, Thomas Jefferson donates his own personal library to the Library of Congress to try to rebuild it. And I've been there and I've seen Jefferson's books. Pretty cool. One reason they're so mean and burn down all our government buildings is that I think it was just a year before, America had attacked Toronto. It wasn't called Toronto back then. I think it was called York back then. Anyway, and that was the capital of Canada at the time. And we burnt down their capital, so they burned down our capital too. Not very nice. By the way, this is why they call it the White House today. Back then, it was just sandstone, so it was light colored. But afterwards, all the stone is in perfect condition. They rebuild all the wood and parts and everything. All the stone is in perfect condition, but it's blackened with smoke. So they decided to paint everything bright white. Now it's the White House. This is a great story. General Coburn was one of the head generals attacking all up and down the coast, and the American newspapers have been mocking him and calling him mean names and things. So when he gets to to DC, he sends his soldiers to all the printers' shops. And back then, all the letters are on separate carved pieces of wood and metal. And he tells the soldiers to find all the letter C's and destroy them so that no one can make fun of them anymore. You can't say General Coburn if you don't have a C, right? Yeah. Thankfully, however, there's like a hurricane that comes and puts out a lot of the fires. There's just massive, massive rain over the next couple days, so a lot of these buildings are not completely destroyed. So here is the route that the Navy took. They can go up the water almost all the way to Washington, D.C., and then walk just a little bit, Battle of Bladensburg, then burn D.C. And after they burn down D.C., they're like, okay, where's the next major target? They get back on their boats, and they say Baltimore, Maryland is the next really big city. And Baltimore still is a very big, important shipping city there. If you ever drive down to D.C., you will go past Baltimore, and you'll see these massive cranes. Imagine the cranes at BIW, but like 3 times bigger. Then imagine like 20 of them in a row. That's what you see going down through Baltimore. It's pretty cool. So they go attack him. Along the way, they pick up 3 Americans. See, after the Battle of Bladensburg, there were a bunch of American civilians who were trying to help, and a bunch of them get captured. There was this one civilian, a doctor, who had been treating the wounds of everyone who's brought to him, both American and British soldiers. And he gets arrested and thrown in a British prison ship for helping the Americans. So a bunch, I think it's 3 rich Americans go to the British captain and say, please, can you release this doctor? Because he's not part of the army. He's just trying to help everyone. He's just trying to help people, save lives, that kind of thing. And the British captain says, okay, I will release that prisoner, but not right now because I'm about to go attack Fort McHenry that's protecting Baltimore. So, okay, one of those people was Francis Scott Key. And he's going to be on the deck of the ship attacking Fort McHenry. While the British are attacking, they have 2 really important weapons that they use to attack long range. First of all, they have long range cannons. They just have huge, huge cannons that can attack so long range. They actually have longer ranges than the cannons on shore. So the American cannons cannot shoot back, and they're firing bombs. This is a bomb of the period. It's just a hollowed out cannonball with gunpowder inside and a fuse. By the way, this fuse is cartoonish. The fuse just looks like that. It just looks like a cork. And you do not light the fuse. You just put the whole unlit thing in the cannon. Then when you shoot off the cannon, all the gunpowder exploding lights that fuse. Second thing they have is rockets, called a Congreve rocket. Just imagine a firework. It is a firework that you shoot horizontally instead of vertically. Rocket-propelled artillery. And they had thousands of these that they would shoot from the ship to the shore. And here's a picture of those rockets being sent up. And I'm sure you know the national anthem is all about this battle, where all through the night, the British ships keep on shooting long range. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase, the rocket's red glare and the bombs bursting in air. First of all, the rockets did not do a lot of damage because they are fireworks. They just go right up against our stone walls and don't really do any damage. They're really meant to be anti-personnel to kill people, but the American soldiers are all hiding behind 5-foot thick stone walls. They do fine. The bombs are bursting in air because there was a manufacturing defect and their fuses were too short, so they're blowing up before they reach their destination. So all these bombs being sent to shore, very few of them actually get there, and they don't really damage the American fort very much at all. And of course, through the song, it says every time the bombs explode, you see this flash of light, and they gave proof through the night that the flag was still there. It was common during the day. If you surrender, you take your flag down, and every time you see an explosion, you say, hey, they haven't surrendered yet, they haven't surrendered yet, they haven't surrendered yet. And we don't surrender. After a night of bombarding, they can't destroy our fort, so they give up and decide to go attack New Orleans instead. The Star-Spangled Banner was a huge flag that was over Fort McHenry, and it still exists today. I've seen it. That flag, the Star-Spangled Banner, is in the Smithsonian. I've been there. It is huge. It would have been in much better condition, but people keep on taking scissors and cutting out pieces to act as a souvenir. So this huge hole in the middle, someone cut out a piece that had a star and a little bit of a stripe there. Other places people cut out, part of a red and a white stripe, and all of these parts have been cut out. Would have been in much better condition if people had not destroyed it, but super cool. If you ever go to DC, you got to see the Star Spangled Banner in the Smithsonian. It's happening in the South. Andrew Jackson is getting a nickname, Old Hickory, because he's as tough and mean and nasty as an Old Hickory branch. He fought the Battle of Horseshoe Bend against Indians before and did very well defeating the Indians. We won't really talk about that right now, though. At the Battle of New Orleans, Andrew Jackson is in charge of defending New Orleans, and the pirate Lafitte is a famous French pirate down there, and he reinforces Andrew Jackson. This is hilarious. When Jean Lafitte saw that the governor was advertising $500 for his capture, he offered $5,000 to capture the governor. Classic pirate right there. The Americans dig trenches and set up defenses, and the British attacked straight headfirst at our defenses. Really stupid idea. They assumed they would win because they are better soldiers than us, and we're just a bunch of farmer hicks. They also have a lot more people than us, but, a gun's a gun. So they lose horribly. 2,000 British people die. Only 71 Americans die. So it's a completely one-sided victory where Andrew Jackson wins this huge victory. And that is pretty much the only reason he became president, is that he won this amazing victory at the Battle of New Orleans. It's actually the biggest battle in the war, and it's the best victory that we have. We do so well at this. And the irony is, the Treaty of Ghent had already been signed. The British had already come to peace with us. The war was over, and our best victory and the biggest battle of the war was after this. Also, one of the USS Constitution's biggest battles and biggest victories was also after the peace treaty had been signed. But no one knew that because it took so long to tell everyone. Results of the war. We decide something called status quo ante bellum, which means the way things were before the war. Neither side won. Not a whole lot of stuff actually changed because of this war. We don't get more land. We don't defeat them. They don't defeat us. We just both give up because so many people have died, and now the side's really winning. Status quo ante bellum. Let's just go back to the way things were before the war and pretend the war never happened. Ugh. We did have some benefits from the war, though. Number one, we gained foreign respect. England was on top of the world. They were doing incredibly well. They were very powerful. They were a world power, and America defeated them again. Well, not really defeated them, but they couldn't defeat us either. We're head-to-head with one of the strongest nations in the world, and everyone's like, wow, America is becoming a world power. America can defend itself. Number two, Tecumseh and his Native American coalition is gone, which means that Americans are going to pour into the Northwest, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota. Yeah. The British blockade was actually kind of good for us. We couldn't buy stuff from British factories, so we just built a bunch of our own factories. Then after the war, we don't need to go back to buying Britain. We have tons and tons of new factories of our own. So that's nice. And then a changed attitude in America. We're better at being isolated. We can now build all our own things. We can make all our own things. We don't need to buy anything from anyone. We're self-sufficient. Americans realize that America is a really cool country, and people become much more patriotic because of this war.